Amazing. So yeah, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to ace any interview. We're going to talk about behavioral interviews. We're going to talk about technical interviews. What are great tips and strategies, probably some pitfalls, things to avoid as well. That being said, Ben, I'm going to give you the floor. It would be great if you could introduce yourself to our group this morning. And I've also shared a screen share. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Sophie. Well, what I'll do today, I'll introduce myself, but since we have a small group today, I'd love to hear and kind of meet everybody that we have on the call. And then from there, we can dive into the topic. So I have a short presentation, but really we can have it be more Q&A. And we can talk about other things other than interviews as well. But I know coming out of a boot camp, that's probably on top of all of your minds is just how to excel and land that first role or land that first technical role that you're looking for. So just a brief intro about me. I am currently a solutions engineering manager at Zoom. So solutions engineering means a number of different things. At Zoom, it's the same as many other companies where solutions engineering is a pre-sales role. So they work with the sales team, but there's also a lot of engineering that goes on and configuring the product and making it fit to the customer's requirements. And my team works more on the configuration side than on the sales side. So we do interact with customers, but we do a lot of engineering work. So I work on a chatbot product. It's called Zoom Virtual Agent. And it's been really fun with the AI space kind of blowing up since I've been working on chatbots for about a year and a half. So hearing all the discussion about ChatGPT, it's kind of exciting because we're in that space at Zoom, and Zoom is becoming much more of an AI company, just like Google and Microsoft are. So it's an exciting space to be in. And just a bit more background about myself. I've taught at boot camps. I've helped develop curriculum at boot camps. And I'd say 80% of my team members come from boot camp. So I got connected with Sophie because one of my solution architects on my team, she attended Rithm, I think 3 or 4 years ago. So it's nothing that I would have expected coming to Zoom. We got acquired, and I think our team, we're all very startup minded. But really excited to be a part of the Zoom team, and also excited to be talking with you. Right now, I'm on paternity leave, and I'm advising another startup called Merit. And Merit helps with mentorship. And coming out of a boot camp, mentorship is really, really useful. And with my work in boot camps previously, Sophie and I have been talking about how to have all of you get access to mentors. So on the Merit platform, there's hundreds of mentors, and if anyone has questions, we can talk about that as well later on in the session, or you can reach out to me individually to talk about mentorship. But with that, would love to meet all of you. So Sophie, if it's okay, maybe we can go around and everyone can give kind of an intro of who they are. If you're looking for like a specific type of role, maybe some of your hobbies or just anything that you want to say about yourself. But really, really interested to meet all of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Who wants to start? Chris.
Yeah, I'll start. My name is Chris. I graduated Rithm this past March 17th, I think was the graduation date. And I'm just looking for a front end role for entry level, obviously. First getting into it, my last industry was architecture, like buildings and stuff. So I got started did architecture and then started making plugins for architecture and then went to a boot camp and then here we are. But yeah, things I like. I just did my first hackathon this last weekend, which is a lot of fun. Looking for the next one. It's shockingly more exhilarating than I thought it would be. And the team was really great too that I lucked out with them for sure. We created an AI chatbot that can source all of your company's information for like like who was in charge of what project, when they did it, who were the team members on it, and all that stuff like that. So yeah, like you said, it was a lot of fun learning all that stuff. Yeah, it was sweet. And yeah.
Cool. Good to meet you, Chris. And cool that others are interested in AI. So be curious to hear what you built and how you built it at some point.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in, I guess. I'm Jalen. I graduated from the same cohort as Chris. I come from like a mental health background and then a customer service background. I've kind of bounced between those two things for the last 10 years. Um, I guess what were the questions? Like, what role are you interested in? I don't, I mean, I'd just be interested in any role, to be honest. But you know, with the first job, just getting your foot in the door. But ideally working with something with maybe like, you know, betterment of self, like mental health or physical health, or in that space, I guess would be fun. And then, you know, we're pretty fresh out of boot camp, so I'm not really sure what I like, what I prefer to work on in terms of like front end or back end. I enjoy both kind of equally at this point, so I'm just excited to, you know, like grow as an engineer and figure out what I like and what I don't. And I would take any role at this point. So yeah.
Well, good to meet you, Jalen.
So I'm Daniel. I graduated from the same cohort as Caitlin and Chris. Let's see. I have a few years of experience already programming, and I really want to make it my career. So I went to Rithm. The role I'm looking for would be either front end or back end. I do have quite a decent amount of experience working on back end applications. But if possible, the role I would pick would be front end. I'm just having a lot of fun building UI components and stuff like that. Yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Good to meet you.
I think that's my cue to go next. So good morning, Ben and everyone else. Ben, thank you for taking the time to do this. Appreciate it. I am not in the same cohort as most of the people in this group, so I'm breaking the mold. I finished Rhythm in February of this year. I've had several interviews, but no offers yet at this point. My background before I did Rhythm was in pharmacology and healthcare, so I worked in those industries. And as far as what role I'm looking for, I'm not particularly picky as far as what I'm looking for either. Front end or back end. Yeah, again, not too picky at this point. As far as what I've been working on, I've been currently volunteering for a brigade that's part of Code for America. So I've been doing that for almost 2 months now. It's been pretty fun. I was actually working on an issue that I started working on last week, and I submitted a pull request for that, and then I've been talking with some people who have been reviewing it and trying to like update it and making sure the code is okay before it gets merged. So hopefully that should be reviewed and merged like sometime later this week or something. But that's been a good experience, kind of building off of what we did as far as our internship during Rhythm. I think that's it for me.
Cool. Good to meet you, Phil.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Ryan. I'm from R27, which graduated in October of last year. I guess that's obvious. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to remind me what the other questions were.
What you're interested in, hobbies,
Like just
basic-
general life hobbies?
Yeah.
I mean, I mountain bike a lot and just got into rock climbing at the gym, mostly because it was the cheapest gym in my area. But so those things. Yeah, role that I'm interested in. Once again, I'm like the other people. I don't care. I would just like a job. I just enjoy like the process of thinking about this. I don't really care about the space that I'm doing it in. I don't know if that's like a bad answer. It's probably the same bad answer that everyone tells me that why do you want this job? Because your paying is, but it's the truth. And as for what I've been working on, not much lately. Yeah.
Cool. I live in Denver and I'm a little hesitant to say, but I went rappelling for the first time last week and outdoorsy stuff. It's been a while since I've done anything, so it was good to get out and be on the mountain. So cool that you like rock climbing.
Spooky being up high, isn't it? I always get freaked out.
yeah, it's something different, but taking in the views, I'm like, it's makes it worth it.
Yeah, until you look straight down.
So true. Anyone else?
Um,
Arlene?
yeah. So, good morning, guys. So my name's Arlene. I am pivoting from a sort of career in planetary research. Used to do research on geochemistry on the surface of Mars. Cool stuff. Bittersweet to let go, but I do cherish it. Uh, with that said, I am ideally long-term goal would be to find myself building software for STEM research, specifically in physical sciences. But currently, I am open to anything, like everyone said, definitely not picky, just want, my foot in the door kind of. So I actually do have a job lined up, but I am always open to learning more, and you can never be too prepared. So, and I'm here. That's all for me.
Good to meet you, Arlene. So it sounds like everyone's in most people are in a similar spot, looking for your first role, not too picky as far as what you want to get into. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We'll get into this part talking about what hiring managers may be looking for. So let me go ahead and start this. So when I started my journey, it was probably 6 years ago now. I had a startup. The startup didn't do too well, and so we ended up closing the business. And I had gone to a 4-year university and did a master's program. And I think doing the startup made me realize I didn't want to do what I'd gotten my degree in, at least my master's degree full time. And I had moved away from where I went to school, and so I was in a new town, didn't know anybody, and also didn't have any connections. And I think for all of you, it's probably similar. You have a background, you've probably worked somewhere or in an industry for a while and have some connections in that industry, but maybe not a whole lot of software engineering connections in your network. And so I did what all of you are probably doing right now. I applied to a ton of jobs. I did a lot of networking and was able to start landing interviews. And it was probably my third time through this process. So I had a software engineering job, moved to a product management role. And then when I was looking for my first solutions engineering job, I felt like I was going through the same process over and over of like, I'm getting to the interview, but the interview isn't working well, or it's taking me a few interviews to get to the point where I'm feeling comfortable and like getting a job offer. And I think in my mind, I had this idea of people would know that I have passion and that I am able to come into a role and really like pick things up quickly and learn, even though there may be some gaps. But it didn't seem like the interviewers were understanding that. And so as I went through the process, and when I started mentoring, I reflected on that a lot of like what was going wrong for me. And as I was getting into sales, I think I realized that the interview was much more for the interviewer than it was for me. So instead of proving myself during the interview, what I really needed to do was make a match between what the interviewer was looking for and the skills and abilities that I had. So I'm curious what all of you think. So when you go into an interview, like what are hiring managers looking for? Like what are the things that are going to make you successful and pass an interview based on either your experience or maybe just some guesses that you may have? Christopher, Phil?
Yeah, I'd probably say definitely culture fit would probably be a big one. And behaviorals, obviously, too.
Yep. So especially with the behavioral interviews, I'm like they're teasing out questions of, yeah, are you going to fit with the culture that we have on the team? Phil?
Yeah, I was gonna go with the kind of obvious answer, but basically just how well you kind of fit the job description in terms of your experience, your technology, your skills, and stuff like that.
So I think the competence aspect of it, a lot of that can be gathered from a resume, but really during the interview, that's what they're trying to assess, right? Are you competent? Are you going to fit our culture coming in? And at a high level, like I think those are really the two things. Do you have the skills? And in all of your cases, can you code? And depending on the job, there may be some other skills that are required, right? Yeah, maybe some domain specific knowledge, like Arlene with physical sciences, if you're going to be launching a rover on Mars. Or in the role that I have with my team, there's a lot of customer facing work that needs to be done. So I often test the communication skills of candidates coming in. And then the culture fit is also a huge thing. You know, are you going to be a value add to the team? That's a little bit murkier. It's hard to test. So getting a little bit more granular, knowing that competence and culture fit, and maybe there's some other things that are important that could be listed in the job description. And to give you an example of what I mean at a more granular level, there's a person that I'm coaching right now. He's going through interviews, and in one of the interviews that he had a whiteboarding question that he had to do. So it was a problem to solve in front of the hiring manager. And he solved the problem and he came to the correct solution. But the hiring manager kept asking him, well, what if you did it this way? Or kept asking him like what would happen if he approached the problem a different way. And when I was talking with him about it, he told me it seemed like the hiring manager didn't like my answer. And ultimately he didn't get an offer from the company. And he thinks something happened during the interview that caused that. So at a more granular level, what do you think hiring managers are looking for when they're testing competence or testing for culture fit? And this is probably a bad question, but Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say probably just like different, being able to approach a problem differently, not just always the same path every time. They want to look for, I guess, diversity and a way to coming to the solution, would be my guess.
Yeah, so I think there's various skills that that hiring managers could be looking for. Creativity, being able to approach problems differently. But it's actually a bad question, but it's a similar question to what a lot of hiring managers may ask in the interview. And what they often do is play guess what's in my head. They're looking for something specific, and they want to see that during the interview process, but they may not ask specifically what they're looking for. So just like my question was, hey, guess what's in my head? Because it really could be anything, right, of what hiring managers are looking for. It's up to us as the interviewer to know that, to ask the questions, to understand what the interviewer wants exactly during the interview process. And this has always frustrated me as a candidate because an interview shouldn't be a guessing game. So like when you're writing code during a whiteboarding question, or when you have a behavioral interview, you know, to me it seems like the hiring managers should say, hey, we really value curiosity on our team. Can you tell me a time about when you were curious? As opposed to, you know, asking you questions to get an understanding of what your curiosity without directly asking that question. Or during a whiteboarding question, you know, saying we're looking for this design pattern. I want to see you use this design pattern in the question, as opposed to just kind of letting you flail during the interview process. So what we're going to talk about today is really how to hit on this, how to ask the right questions to understand what hiring managers are looking for, and then to take your experience and fit it to that. Phil, do you have a question before we move on?
More of like a comment type of thing, just kind of to emphasize what you were talking about earlier. We had a presentation, or at least I had a presentation a little while back from someone who was a hiring manager interviewer at Google, and he kind of said that like it's the questions that get asked during like whiteboarding or technical interviews are kind of not really representative of what software engineering actually is, because it's not really realistic to be able to solve something completely from start to finish in like less than an hour. So he's kind of looking more for like, your thought process, your ability to communicate, just like what you said, as far as like having a conversation. Those are also kind of the skills that they're really looking off of, just like build instead of just like how you solve the problem, it's like everything else around it as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the best hiring managers understand that software development, and I'd say that most jobs out there that are similar to software development, whether it's project management or even working with a team in the physical sciences, it's much more about the communication and the teamwork, those soft skills, that culture of a team, as opposed to can you solve this problem in the most optimal way. Of course that's important, but if you're doing everything else, communicating well with your manager and with your teammates, working together as a team, then all of that other stuff, you'll be able to figure out the right solution to the problem and be able to do it in an efficient way as a team. So I think that's what hiring managers should be looking for. And unfortunately, I think a lot of hiring managers either don't know how to look for that or don't know that they should be looking for that during the interview process. But Phil, to your point, I think every hiring manager does appreciate that when you, as the candidate coming in, are able to demonstrate that during the interview process, that you do know how to communicate well and that you do know how to work together as a team. But any other thoughts, questions, or experiences that people have had that either go to this point or maybe are against them? Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the questions that you should be asking during the interview process. Because my number one piece of advice, if I could distill this whole lesson down to one sentence, is to make the interviews that you go into a conversation. And whether that's a technical interview or a behavioral interview, if you're having a conversation with the hiring manager, questions are going to come out naturally on both sides. And what you're also going to do is you're going to put the interviewer in a much more comfortable position. Because this may, I don't know if this may be surprising, but hiring managers are often uncomfortable during interviews too, especially new managers that don't know what they're doing. I had that experience last year where I thought I knew what I was supposed to do during the interview process. I had practiced it, as a hiring manager when I was in boot camp. So I went through a lot of mock interviews and I was like, oh, I got this thing down. And then I got into it and I was like, oh, this is much more complicated than I thought. Because it wasn't just me, there was my entire team doing the interviews, and I had to set up the process. And by having a conversation, what it does is it puts both of you at ease. It allows it to be less formal, and less like an interview and much more like you would just be talking to your manager on the job. And I think that makes the experience more authentic for both sides, for the interviewers and for the interviewees. But before we dive into this, like any thoughts of good questions that you could ask during the interview that can help tease out this information about what the hiring manager is looking for and what would help you be successful in the role? So like any thoughts of good questions that you could ask during the interview? Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
In my last interview, I literally just said, is this what you're looking for? Would you like me to expand on anything? And that seemed to have done a really good job.
I mean, it's amazing how simple that question is, but it's so effective of just asking for feedback, right? Hey, is this what you're looking for? Anything else you want me to do? But a question like that, during technical interviews, what I usually advise is that you ask that question multiple times. You don't have to ask it in the same way, like change up the phrasing, but the process that I have for technical interviews is to essentially ask that question 4 different times, at least 4 different times during the technical interview. So it's actually an excellent question. So thanks for sharing. Any other thoughts of good questions to ask during the interview that you may have experienced or you may think that are good? Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
One question that I asked in an interview I had, and the recruiter that I was talking to didn't have an engineering background, but I asked her I asked her to describe like how the company culture was and like how her experiences were within her specific department, but also within the company, and she seemed to like that question.
Yeah. So getting really any question that gets them talking will help you discover information, right? So any question that's like, hey, tell me about your job, or can you describe what it's like? Even with a recruiter, you can get information about what the company culture is like. And then with team members, you can get more specific information. What's it like working with your manager? What's it like working on the job using the technologies that I'd be using? So really great questions too, to just capture information to get some discovery going. So there's three main types of questions that I like using. And so you hit on the first two, which is amazing, right? So what Daniel was saying is really questions to get feedback or to get reflection. So it's and I'd say if you're going to use any question, this is probably the most important because it allows you to know where you stand during the process, and it allows you to get unstuck. So like, let's say that you've developed a solution to a problem and you think it's going well, or maybe you're developing a solution and you run into a problem. Asking a question to get some feedback, to get the interviewer talking to you is really helpful. And a really simple way to do this, to ask these reflective questions, to make it a conversation. This is a good rule of thumb, but just think any regular conversation. If someone asks you, hey, where are you from? Or hey, what's your favorite color? The typical icebreakers. The easiest thing to do is just repeat the question back to them after they've asked it. So with a hiring manager, when to make it a conversation, you have to ask questions up front. You can't just wait until the end when they say, hey, any questions for me? So an easy way to make it a conversation is after the first question, just ask the interviewer the same question. If they're like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, you can give an intro, give your 1 to 3 minute explanation of your background, what you're interested in, your skills and qualifications. And then at the end of your answer, just be like, hey, curious to know more about you and your team. And by doing that, it just makes it feel natural. And I have yet to come across a situation where an interviewer is like, oh no, we have like 10 other questions to answer. I'll answer it. And if anything, they'll say, I'll answer that later so that we can get through the material. And then they'll come back to it. But I haven't had a situation where a hiring manager has gotten angry or upset because I've asked a question earlier in the conversation. And as a hiring manager, I've really appreciated when candidates have done that and made it a conversation, because it just makes it easier for both sides to get a sense of really what they're looking for and to communicate during the process. So any questions about how to ask these reflective questions or questions for feedback, or starting a conversation with these reflective questions? Okay. I feel like discovery questions kind of fits in the same boat as those reflective questions. You can ask them at any time during the process, and it goes really well. For these questions, it's really helpful to prepare some in advance, which I imagine all of you have done, or have received that advice of prepare some questions before going in. This last question, I guess, is a specific type of reflective question, that the closing question. and it's more of a sales tactic that actually works really well in the interview. It's more of a communication principle than a sales tactic. But when I was looking for my first solutions engineering job, I talked with a solutions engineering manager, just about what to do during the interviewing process in order to make sure that it was successful. And he said, never leave the interview without asking how you did in the interview. And he phrased it as a closing question. And the question that he told me to ask was, is there anything that would prevent you from moving me forward in the hiring process? And so I'll sit with that question and break it down a little bit. Is there anything that would prevent you from moving me forward in the hiring process? So that first part, is there anything that would prevent you? What it's doing is it's asking the interviewer to surface any doubts that they may have about the interview that you had. And it's a tough question to ask because you're asking for feedback on the spot. You're essentially asking if you did well or if you didn't. And with this question, when I started asking it, I remember one interview, I asked the question at the end, and it was kind of a panel interview, so there was 4 or 5 interviewers in the room, and one of the interviewers kind of hesitated for a second, but was like, well, based on your resume, doesn't look like you have very many years of experience, and they were looking for a senior engineer, and this was going to be my first time in the role. And so I asked the question, I got the feedback, and I knew immediately that, like, I thought the interview had been going well, and I knew immediately that things may not move forward at that point. And so I tried to kind of respond to it quickly, but when you're at the end of the interview, there's not a lot of time, and I didn't do too well at answering that, and I didn't get an offer. And so my next interview, I was like, I'm going to ask this question earlier in the process. So it was an hour-long interview with the second interview that I had, and about 40 minutes in, I asked the same question. Like, it seemed like things had been going well up until that point with the conversation, and everything was flowing. I was asking questions, they were asking questions, we were telling stories, we were like laughing and joking together. And so then about 40 minutes in, it was the hiring manager and the CEO of a fairly small company. So I asked them, I'm like, hey, is there anything on my resume or that we've talked about today that would prevent you from moving things forward to the next step? And the CEO kind of looked at my resume for a second, looked at me and was like, no. And then I think the hiring manager kind of kept asking me questions because things had been going well. But at that point, I'm like, great, this interview is going well, and I know that I'm going to be continuing to the next round. And I did. And I continued to, I guess, the technical interview, and then ended up getting an offer at that company. So with the closing questions, and it's not like you have to ask this during any interview if you don't feel comfortable with it, but it can be a really effective way to kind of troubleshoot, to see where you're at and to move on. And if there are problems, resolve those issues before kind of moving on to the next thing. And it works really well in technical interviews too, where at the end of solving a problem, you can ask the question, hey, with my solution, is there anything that you would have done differently? And then from there, kind of taking the feedback and talking through it and resolving any doubts that the interviewer may have with that. But if you can master these three steps of, asking questions to generate conversation, asking the right questions and knowing what questions to ask to get the information out of the interviewer, to understand, this is more for your perspective, to understand if it would be a good role for you. And then I think the cherry on top is being able to ask those closing questions to make sure that you can get to the next round, or if you're at the last round, making sure that you close the deal and that they give you an offer when it's all done. So what's everyone's gut take with this? Like, is this something that all of you are doing naturally right now as far as asking questions? Would this be different than your current process or your current style style of doing interviews? Christopher, thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm doing the first two. The last one, asking for feedback, definitely not doing that. I don't know, I feel like I'm a little like hesitant to ask that, because it's kind of like putting them on the spot, to like make a decision right there type of thing. And I don't think it would come off as like not like confrontative, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it'd be interesting to ask that question. I've never tried asking that question before, so we'll see on the next one, hopefully.
Yeah, it's good feedback. May come back to you here in a second, but let's Daniel, did you have something to share, or Jalen?
I asked that closing question in my last interview, and boy, was it like super awkward, like just waiting for his response. And then eventually he said, like, I have no questions at this time. But that was probably the most awkward, like 15 seconds of my life.
Did you get an offer from that company?
No, I wasn't able to make the next round, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know why. Yeah. So yeah, kind of blows, but gotta keep pushing.
That's really good feedback. Let's come back to that in a second. Jalen?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I asked, like, after the technical interview, I was maybe nervous, or I don't know. I was like, hey, I was pretty blunt with the guy, and I was just like, hey, this was my first technical interview. Do you have any tips for me? And he did tell me, he's like, hey, you seemed like, I mean, I could tell it was like one of your first times doing this. And then he gave me some resources. But I got called back to the second round. In the second round, I asked the question like more confidently, but in a different way. I like the way you phrase it a lot better. But I phrased it as, do you have any concerns about hiring me that I could, that we could discuss, or something like that? And he was just like, not at this time. And but I didn't get a offer. So I don't know.
So this is really great. Like, I'm excited that you're asking these questions in your interviews. And so maybe we can take a second and dissect what's going on. Because so you're asking these questions, and it sounds like the response, Daniel and Jalen, that you got was actually pretty similar, of like, no questions at this time. So what would the ideal response be to, hey, how do you think I did? Like, is there anything that would prevent you from moving me forward to the next round? Like, what is the ideal response to that question? Yeah, Daniel, do you have any thoughts?
Honestly, I just want the hard truth, like no sugarcoating, like just give it to me raw and pure, you know. And me and Jalen were both interviewing with the same person, so that's why we probably got the same response.
Okay. Jalen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just echo what Daniel said, is like, I'd probably, just give it to me straight. But then I mean, the ideal thing would be, no, we like you, or something, but what do you, how are you supposed to take that? Like, how did you take that, as when he said, you don't have those enough years experience? It's like, well, obviously it was your homework to look at my resume and tell how much years experience I had before you interviewed me. But like, is this a place to defend yourself, or you just sit there and nod and be like, okay? Or, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when you ask that question and you do get the feedback of like, hey, this thing is preventing us from moving forward, that's great, because one, they're confident enough to share their doubts with you. So that means that you actually did well. And I think for me, I did well in that interview. And I probably could have worked through it, but I didn't leave myself enough time, or so I was like right on the edge. I think when you get the answer that Daniel and Chandler, what both of you got, of no further questions at this time, or you kind of have to gauge where they're at, because that could mean like, oh, you aced it, or it could mean there's some things that are missing, but the interviewer doesn't feel comfortable sharing them. So the fact that you get any feedback is good. When you do get that feedback, what I've always, well, I guess I had to learn this, but with any doubts that come up, what you want to do is drill into those doubts. So for the feedback that I got, oh, you don't have enough years of experience for this. I didn't know it at the time. At the time, I would have defended myself and been like, oh, but I have done these three things. But based on what we've been talking about so far, that person probably had a specific reason why they brought that doubt up. It could have been that they would have been uncomfortable having me on a call with a customer because I had never done it before. It might be that they would have thought that I had would have taken too long to ramp up and get up to speed to be productive at the company. Or maybe it wasn't really that big of a deal, and they're like, well, I mean, you don't have that much experience, but we really like you, so we're just unsure. We just need to talk to you again. And so if I could have gone back, what I would have done is just asked a follow-up question of, hey, can you tell me more about that? So asking a question to a discovery question at this point to reveal the information underneath the real concern that they have will allow you to then have a dialogue about it. What you don't want to do is feel like you're a lawyer defending yourself in court, because that's not a conversation. That's a testimony, whatever they do in court. And then you're leaving it to the jury to decide, and you don't want to do that. What you want to do is have a conversation to work it out together in the moment, and asking a discovery question will allow that conversation to happen, as opposed to turning it into testimony. But really good experiences, like really good thoughts too on this whole process. And one thing that I will say is this is just like coding. It's a skill. This is a communication skill that you can use even outside of an interview. So having a discussion with, I don't know, your romantic partner, or even with a friend, deciding where to go eat, asking these types of questions to come to a conclusion is, it's I guess a communication skill, a life skill, as opposed to just an interviewing skill. And just like your coding has improved and will continue to improve with time, every mock interview that you go through, every real interview that you go through, and really any discussion that you have where you have to decide things with other people will allow you to use this question process to come to a conclusion and improve your skills there. I'm working, it's been 5 or 6 years, I guess, that I've been specifically working on these skills outside of my coding skills. And I'm always amazed to realize that there's a lot more for me to learn on how to ask the questions, and then how to communicate and listen in order to have good conversations. So with this, I think this, I'm trying to think if I had anything else. Yeah, this was everything that I had on the interviewing side, the technical and the behavioral interviewing process. I imagine with all of you in the process of going through interviews now that you may have questions, or wanting to work through different scenarios. So is there any interviews that you've had that you have questions about that we could talk through as a group to kind of solution or discover and learn together? Yeah, go ahead, Jalen.
I had an interview where I guess I didn't really have a good read. So I had an interview that was in person. He had me send him a repo of one of my projects that we did from Rithm. I was pretty fresh from graduating, so I didn't do, or I didn't have a whole lot of time to improve the project. And he was asking me to defend like how I organized some things. And I didn't really have a very good reason other than like that's what I was taught, And so like what would be ideal in this? Because it's like, I guess that's kind of more a startup's kind of interviews, like, let me see your project, let's break it down and see how we go. But if there's like code style questions or things like that, is it fair to say like that's how I was taught in boot camp? And I think he did it. I kind of asked him like, what are you looking for here? Because he was like, well, boot camp will teach you how to do something a certain way, but you need to know like the why and kind of find your own why of like why you're doing it the way. And so I wasn't really sure like what's the best approach if you are like kind of blindsided. And then maybe like a piggyback off that too is like if you have starter code that's not yours, like the bootcamp gave us a lot of starter code. Uh, I I don't know, how do you handle that if someone's like breaking down a project of yours in an interview setting?
Well, it sounds like you did it really well, because you asked him for feedback of like, hey, how would you do this? And I think that's the best way to do it is kind of explain where you're at. Um, so own where you're at and own, why you did what you did. But I think showing that curiosity of by asking those questions of, well, how would you do it? Shows that you're open to learning and open to growing. And during an interview, I think there's also these preconceived notions that a lot of interviewers bring in. And sometimes it's impossible to overcome all of those, but by asking those questions, at the very least, you're going to learn. You're going to learn during the interview, and um, I think asking those questions will allow you to get over their doubt or their concern much better than if you're just trying to defend yourself. So, I mean, just like a conversation would be, reveal. It sounded like you did it the right way, Kaylin or Chaylin, is revealing some information, kind of explaining the situation, and then asking a question to learn what they're thinking, and then improving the process down the road. So it sounds like you handled it the right way. So, perfect. Well, if you do have any other questions, you can bring them up. I have some information about merit that I'll walk you through that can hopefully be a resource for each of you to practice with interviews, or if there's other things that you're working on, whether you want some help with code reviews or technical interviews or like a resume review, or really just networking in general. I'll explain the Merit platform and why I found it so helpful for me early on in my career. And if you do have questions about interviews, you can kind of bring them up as we're talking through this. So the Merit platform it's a way to connect with mentors. So when I was first looking for a job as a solution engineer and trying to break into product management as well, I remember I had to send out I probably sent out hundreds of messages on LinkedIn to get conversations with people to just learn what the job was and to know how to interview better. And because I think I had heard that feedback of it's much better to network than it is to apply to a job, especially when your resume doesn't fit super well. If you're trying to make a career transition and your resume doesn't fit super well. And it was around this time, it was between my product management job and when I moved into solutions engineering, that I found Merit. And ever since I've been on the Merit platform, like my career has skyrocketed because, and I think it's a variety of factors, but I met the founder of Merit, and he ended up becoming my mentor over time. So I met with him monthly for the last 4 years, and every time I felt stalled in my career or felt like I wasn't where I needed to be, the conversation I had with my mentor like helped me break out of the funk that I was in. And it was amazing because they've been building this platform for 5 years, and at the very beginning it was very curated, and it's the same way that it was when I first joined. You can go on and literally just book a time with anybody. So I'm a mentor on there. So if any of you want to talk to me, you can come on the Merit platform, book some time with me. If there's a target company that you're looking at, like if you want to get into Amazon, there's people that work at Amazon on there, or Uber, or a lot of smaller startups as well. So it just removes all of that friction and all of the work that it would take to go and network with somebody. You can literally just go on, book some time, and you have to fill out a little description of what you want to talk about with them when you go on. But what ends up happening is you talk with that person and you can talk about anything, and you can book as many meetings as you want. So I probably booked 15, 20 meetings over the first couple of years in my career as a solution engineer. And I think that's what ended up leading to my role as a manager, is having those conversations with managers. It really changed my perspective on what managers are looking for and like what soft skills I should be developing in myself. Because I think you can guess, and it's always helpful when you have your one-on-ones with your manager, but having a breadth of experience, whether you're looking for a job or you're looking to level up your career, is really helpful. So that's my 2 cents on merit, and that's part of the reason why I met Sophie, is trying to expand the number of people that are joining merit. To me, it's a weird problem, but as a mentor, I'm not, and other mentors on the platform, we're not getting as many sessions doing mentorship as we would hope. So we're trying to evangelize it and getting people to sign up. So that's the experience I had. I guess getting a job and then moving up was really powerful with mentorship. So whether you're doing it right now or whether you land your job, I think having a mentor will really help you feel comfortable and then help you continue to be successful in your career. So whether it's a mentor on merit, or maybe you have a mentor already, or when you land your job, maybe it's a mentor within your company, but finding somebody that can help you navigate the uncertainties and just the questions that come up can be really powerful in helping you grow your software engineering career. So with that, I guess that's everything from my end. So we have a few minutes if there's any topics that all of you want to chat through, apart from interviewing or apart from mentorship. That's been really good so far. So any other like thoughts or questions that are on all of your minds as you're kind of preparing to get into the workforce as software engineers?
Yeah, I got one. You guys hiring?
So Zoom is starting to hire again, and I'm really there. Since I'm on paternity leave, I'm not hiring right now, but Zoom, there's roles on my team that are starting to come up. So I imagine that I'll get approval to start hiring again probably later this year. So for all of you, like I know the market is really tough right now, but that could be a good indication too. I think things are starting to turn. The fact that we're hiring at Zoom and the layoff announcements seem to be, I don't see as many layoff announcements as there were earlier in the year. So but hopefully it's a good sign for all of you as you're looking right now.
Are there any sites in particular that have helped with your job search? Like I think we were told about Ada and a few like Well Found, a few of those. Are there any like hidden gems that you got up your sleeve?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think what I've used recently, and anything that I've used may be outdated because it's the last few jobs that I've gotten have been through recruiters. I'm trying to think. So for networking, I guess for me, like networking has been really important. So like Merit has been the main platform that I use, but there's another one called Lunch Club. That's it's a little bit different. It's more informal on Lunch Club. So instead of picking who you'd meet with, you just say like, I want to meet with somebody at this time, and then they connect you with somebody, and their AI is really good. I've met some really interesting people on Lunch Club. And then I'm sure all of you are using like Leak Code and Hacker, I forget the Hacker Rank, for practicing those technical interviews. There's another tool called Pramp that I've used, PRAMP, that allows you to do practice interviews. I found it was helpful to do like 2 or 3, but past that, it's because you're interviewing with a peer, it's much better to interview with a hiring manager who like actually has done hiring before. But I think it's good to do that first to just get the kinks out of the way, to get comfortable with like the interview process, and kind of put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes for a second too, because I think with Pramp you do both sides. But I don't know, maybe I should open up that to the group because I'm curious too. I've been out of the loop for a while, and so any good platforms that or tools that all of you have used recently in the job hunt process? All the job boards, LinkedIn.
I think we've listed the most helpful job boards that exist. There is one though that is not really a board, it's people. That's the one that's been the most efficient at the moment. Just connecting with new people, meeting new people, networking, making those new connections lead to opportunities. They're usually hidden, and it doesn't have to be a professional setting. It could be you go to someone's house, it's a housewarming party or a barbecue, and boom, there you go. I really want to insist on the hidden side of finding opportunities, and that's just focusing on meeting people first. There is a tool that everybody's talking about. I talked about it a few weeks ago in our newsletter. It's called Teal. You want to do some research, TEAL. Lots of great resources on their website. They have a lot of tips for interview prep. They talk about AI. There's a blog that's very helpful. There's lots of resources and new articles every week. So you want to check that out too, TEAL. But yeah, people first, tools second.
I would echo that as well. Like networking, it's one of those things that pays off now and in the long run. So, and doing it in an authentic way, building relationships is the way to go. And all of you are doing it now. Like the fact that you're showing up and being a part of the Rithm community and meeting new people like myself. So glad that I could meet all of you today, and don't hesitate to reach out to me on Merit. I'd be happy to talk with each of you and recommend. I have people in my network that may be a good fit for you to continue talking to. So it's one of those things where you may talk to one person, but they may not have a job for you, but they can connect you with somebody that may have other resources or is hiring at the moment.
Yeah. Bill, you had a question?
I did actually. Do we still have time for my questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry if I missed the end of what you were saying, because I had some very large trucks driving by where I am right now, so it was kind of hard to hear. But I had two questions, if that's okay. I remember in the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about like our backgrounds and stuff. I might have missed it. Were you also like a career changer, or?
I've done so many things that I guess my title is probably more a career changer than anything, but I ran a startup for a while. I was a software engineer. I was a product manager. I was a solution engineer. And now I'm a solution engineering manager.
Okay.
I didn't go to a boot camp myself. I went, I did an undergrad and then a master's program.
Okay, yeah, I remember you were saying that. And then my follow-up question to that is, as far as using the Merit platform, and you said that's something that you wanted to connect with Sophie about and everything like that. Will we just be like hearing more information about that, like through Rithm School? Like, do we just sign up for it now? Or I see Sophie nodding, so I'm assuming she'll follow up with us on that.
That's the thing I wanted to say before logging off. Yes. So we're currently, Ben and I had a conversation, I think 10 days ago. I'm working with our marketing team and particularly the people who handle our website to make sure that all of the information is included directly on our landing page. So there's that. And I'm going to include the login information and the quick intro on our newsletter this week. So when you open your newsletter, you can click on that link and that's going to take you to the platform. Ben has also added a link now, so you don't have to wait for the newsletter. You can just go ahead and sign up.
If you can't wait till next week,
I know some of them can't wait. And then I'll post it everywhere in our various Slack channels. I'll make sure that the information gets to you. But yeah.
Yeah, good questions. Well, it's good meeting all of you. Hopefully, I see all of you again at some point. And Sophie, thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to meet everybody and chat with everyone today.
Of course, my pleasure. And thank you so much for your time. Great tips and insights. And I can't wait for our next conversation with you. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
That's fine. Bye.
Thanks.